This video is going to show you how to route the backup camera from the rear of your SUV through the cabin and connect it to the Sylvania Roadsight Mirror. We recommend starting with the camera on the exterior of the vehicle where it's going to be first. Almost without exception, the best place to actually mount the camera is going to be above your license plate. This usually will have a shelf or some sort of a trim piece where you can mount the camera, and there will often be an existing channel for wiring for the lights that illuminate your license plate. Go ahead and open the hatch on your SUV and take a look at the trim that's behind your hatch. In other words, the trim that's covering up where the wire needs to come through to go from the outside of the vehicle, which is above your license plate, into the interior vehicle so you can run the wire through the vehicle to the front of the vehicle to the actual roadside mirror itself. In this case, we have, it looks like 4 panels, 1 on the top, 2 on the sides, and then a bigger one on the bottom. In almost all vehicles, the panels are going to be a series of interlocking panels. So the trick is to find the top one, the one that needs to come off first, and then from there, once you get the first one, it's usually pretty straightforward to figure out what the subsequent panels, what order we should say the subsequent panels will come off. Another great thing to have is a pair of pry bars. The plastic ones are the best because they won't scratch the metal. And go ahead and take your time, but don't be afraid to put some force into it to get some of these off. Some of them can be a little tricky to get off, so just wiggle them, pry them, get them off, and work your way down to where you expect the wire for the backup camera to be poking through. Now we are on to the final panel on the back of this SUV. It's this large black panel, and a big panel is not that different from a small panel. You want to work your way around the edges, and once you get one fastener to release, generally the subsequent fasteners will become easier and easier to remove as you pull back on the panel. This particular vehicle has a light in it, so now that we have the panel itself loose, we need to unplug the light before we can completely take the panel out of the picture. Now that you have access to the back of the door, or the hatch I should say, go ahead and take another look at where you plan on putting the reverse camera. And then you want to see if there's a natural pathway. There's almost always going to be a hole or a slot or something for you to be able to route the wire. You really don't want to drill a hole through your hatch. It's just going to be an invitation for rust and other corrosion issues to kind of manifest themselves. So really just put on your detective hat, really take a good hard look at what is inside of your hatch, where all the cavities are, and where the best place to route your camera is. In this case, what we're going to try to do is utilize the gap that's between the light that illuminates the license plate and the actual panel of the vehicle. So we're going to go ahead and pull that housing down a little bit, and then we have a cavity up here, and we're going to see if we can run a fish up through the back. Sure enough, we can. So that fish is going to allow us to pull down the wire of the backup camera. If you've ever wondered why your backup camera can be plugged and unplugged, this is why. It gives you the ability to route it through tight little crevices like this and then plug it in once you get into the interior of the vehicle. So we're taping up our fish, and we're taping up the camera to the fish, pulling it down. And we have to remove this little grommet here too. We're going to actually run it through the grommet in this case. And for now, what we're going to do is simply use a piece of electrical tape and tape the camera roughly where we're going to want it in the end. Now what you want to do is look at any existing wiring that's already in the hatch of your SUV, and the best thing to do is to simply run the wire for your camera along your existing wire channels and simply use electrical tape, or you can use zip ties to secure the backup camera wire to the existing wire in your vehicle. This method makes for a really clean installation, and then you don't have to worry about the wire for the backup camera getting pinched in any type of hinge or mechanism when the door opens and closes, because you're utilizing the factory channel, pathway, what have you, to run your wiring. You're simply hitchhiking on the engineer's efforts to have a place for the wires to run without getting pinched. Almost all SUVs will have a little rubber connection that covers up the wires that go along the hinge between the hatch and the body of the vehicle. So the best thing to do is pop off this rubber cover and then run your backup camera wire right through that rubber cover, and then you can put that rubber cover back in place and you have a professional installation that's not going to be subject to any type of water or sunlight or anything from the outside world. It's going to be protected, it's going to look great, and then you know that it's not going to get pinched and fray and no longer work after a period of time. So now we're pulling the rest of this wire through, and then we will go ahead and put that rubber grommet back in place. Now what we're going to do is pull back on the door seal and see if we can't see through this panel that's in the rear cargo area. A lot of times you don't actually need to take this panel off, but you can simply run a fish back through that cavity. So here you see us pushing the fish all the way through, and voila, there it is. We're going to tape up the reverse camera to the fish and go ahead and pull your fish so that you're pulling the reverse camera light all the way through. The inside portion of the door seals on almost all vehicles offer a small channel that is the perfect place to route any type of wire, in this case your backup camera wire. So go ahead and pull back the inner part of your door seal, and you can just stuff that wire in. If you have any difficult transitions, such as a 90-degree corner or something like that, what we found to be the easiest way to navigate those is simply pull down on the seal all the way down from the vehicle, and that should give you additional purchase to run your wire. Go ahead and continue to run the wire all the way until you reach the B pillar. Once you reach the B pillar, go ahead and pull down the door seal both for the back door and also the front door. And then it depends on your car, but then you should be able to route the wire behind the panel covering up the B pillar and yet above the seat belt. You may need to use a fish. In some vehicles, you may actually need to remove this panel to get through there, but you'd be surprised. A lot of times you'll be able to run this wire right behind that panel without having to remove anything. Continue to run the wire along that channel on the door seal all the way until you reach the top of the A pillar. Once you reach the A pillar, go ahead and pull it back a little bit and then push the backup camera wire into the top of the A pillar with your panel tool. You should be able to push it down far enough that the cover on the A pillar is not pushed down at all, that there's a big cavity back there that the wire can sit. In almost every vehicle, there's going to be a gap between the top of the windshield and the headliner. So go ahead and use your panel tool to push the wire into that gap and get it all the way to your rear view mirror. Now it's a great idea to test your work. Plug in the camera and power cords into your Sylvania Roadsight Mirror and make sure that the rear camera works before going back and buttoning things back up. Now go ahead and secure the camera to the back of your vehicle now that you know it works. In this case, we're using the double-sided foam tape, and we're going to press that right up into place. In this particular vehicle, where we're mounting the camera is actually a piece of plastic trim. So we have no reservations with using the included screws as well, just as an extra security measure. If your vehicle does not have plastic trim where you're mounting the camera and it's metal trim, we strongly encourage you to think about just using the foam tape and not using the screws because that could provide some unwanted corrosion issues. Here we're tightening up the screws on the side of the camera. This simply locks into place the positioning that we have the camera. Go ahead and put the housing for the lights that illuminate the license plate back in place. So now it's time to put your car back together. Simply do it in the reverse order that you took any panels or other pieces of your vehicle off. The key thing when tackling a project like this is to be willing to wear your detective hat and also think about how the engineers designed the vehicle. So in this case, we know that we're putting a camera near the license plate. We know that there's lights illuminating the license plate, and we know that the engineers who designed this vehicle designed a pathway to get the wires to those lights all the way from the front of the vehicle to the rear of the vehicle. So particularly in an area like this where you have a hatch or a door, you know that there's engineers who have planned for that type of pathway and that type of transition for the wires to occur. So the best way, again, is to find those wires, zip tie your new backup camera to those existing wires, and run it exactly how the wires for those lights are running. So snap those panels in place and enjoy your new Roadsight Mirror camera system.